Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Today, inshallah, I hope we can go over some of the common fiqh questions that arise when discussing the issue of fasting. There are some FAQs, or frequently asked questions, that come about, and so hopefully we can cover them. Hopefully you'll get your question answered, inshallah. Now, with regards to the whole concept of fasting, we should know that the word sawm or siyam, which means fasting, comes from sama yasumu. And sama yasumu is the verb which means to withhold, and it implies to withhold from something specific at a specific time and with specific conditions. So what are we withholding from? Well, the three things are what? Food, drink, and intimacy with one's spouse. That's what you're withholding yourself from. And in terms of the specific time, everybody, I would hope you are aware, that is from the beginning of Fajr time until Maghrib. But then the question is, when does Fajr actually begin? A lot of people don't know this. They say, yeah, just whatever my app says. Yeah, but that's not necessarily sufficient. The actual answer is that Fajr begins at as-subh as-sadiq, or you could say the true dawn, and you know that the true dawn has come at the beginning of the twilight. And so easier way of saying this is basically it's pitch black during the night, and then you start to see a little bit of light come up, like as a straight line maybe, or as just a little bit of light. But then eventually that light starts to cover the horizon. And once you find that that light is actually covering the width of the sky, that is when the Fajr has begun. And then until Maghrib, and of course Maghrib is when the sun has completely set beneath the horizon. So that's the timing of the fast. Now, it's also important to note that it is a sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ to eat up until just moments before the adhan of Fajr. The Prophet ﷺ would encourage us to eat suhoor. The idea of saying, you know what, I'm going to tough it out and just starve myself extra and not eat suhoor, this is actually not recommended. I mean, you definitely want to hydrate yourself, even just from a medical perspective. You want to make sure you get the water for the day. And also, we know that it's the same thing for Maghrib, that the Prophet ﷺ in fact encouraged us to eat our iftar right at the time of Maghrib. As the Prophet ﷺ said, what? لا يزال الناس بخير ما عجلوا الفطرة. The people will remain on the right path as long as they hasten the breaking of the fast. So this idea of saying, you know what, I'm just going to keep going longer and longer, that makes me more righteous. No, rather we're encouraged to eat at both of those times. Allah Alam, maybe one benefit, one wisdom behind this is that it brings us together. I would definitely think that that's at least one of the wisdoms, is that part of the beauty of this month is that as a family you wake up together, you eat breakfast together, and then at Maghrib time you get together with friends and family and friends, and alhamdulillah we all eat together. So that could be part of it, and Allah knows best. Now, what were the specific conditions? As we said, withhold from a specific thing at a specific time, and now what are the specific conditions? Well, one of the conditions is the intention. You do have to make the intention, and you have to make the intention for the next day that you're going to be fasting. So the night prior, you're supposed to actually have the intent. Now, do you have to say it out loud? Is there some sort of specific way? No, it's just an intention is just to think it, and this is because the Prophet said, "What? La siyama liman lam yubayyit as-siyama min al-layl." That there is no fast for the one who didn't have the intent to fast the night before. So you have to have the intention. Now, let's give an example. Let's say a person is not paying attention to when Ramadan comes in. They're not even paying much attention. They don't care too much. And then, they sleep in really late. They sleep all the way into Dhuhr time, maybe even all the way till Asr time. And then when they wake up, they say, hey, what's going on? Their family says, hey, guess what? Today was the first day of Ramadan. And they're like, oh, really? Seriously? Today's Ramadan? Well, technically I've been sleeping all day, so I guess I'm fasting. Yeah, that's not allowed. You can't do that. You have to have the intent from the night before that you actually had the intention to fast, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. Now, you can make the intention at the beginning of the month that I'm going to fast for the entire month, right? Most people have that intention. But if, let's say, theoretically you were to get sick or to travel or whatever the case is, something that actually causes you to break the fast, then you have to remake that intention, inshallah ta'ala, when you do get back to your city, or when you do get healthier, you'd want to remake that intention. Because again, same thing, if you get back from travel, you pass out, and then you wake up and you had no intention to fast, and you hadn't been fasting for the past couple of days because you were a traveler, and then again, you just sort of wake up like, huh, what? Oh yeah, right, it's Ramadan, and I haven't been fasting all these days, but now I'm in my city, I guess I should fast. Well, I guess I was fasting all day, today, so I guess that counts. No, you should have had the intent from the night before. I hope that's clear, inshallah ta'ala. Now, then the question is, who fasts? Well, the default is that everybody, as Allah says, فَمَنْ شَهِدَ مِنْكُمُ الشَّهْرَ فَلْيَصُمْهُ. Allah Ta'ala says what? So whoever sees the month, or whoever witnesses this month, in other words, whoever's alive during this month, let him fast, or let that person fast. So technically everybody, but then I should say, the general ruling is everyone, but then the technical answer is that there are certain exceptions. Who are the exceptions? Well, first and foremost, children are the exceptions. Now, when does that status change? Obviously, you're not going to tell a baby to fast. It doesn't even make sense. But once a child reaches the age of 7, the parents should start encouraging the child. So encouragement should begin at the age of 7. Does the kid have to complete the fast? No, it could be the case that they try for half a day or whatever the case may be, but you're just getting them used to it. And inshallah, even if they're young, 7, 8 years old, whatever the case is, and if they do complete it, then inshallah they are rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That being said, it becomes an obligation, however, after you're training them from 7, 8, 9, whatever, then it becomes an obligation when one of 3 things happens, whichever one happens first. Number 1, the child becomes 15 years old. If the child becomes 15, now it's an obligation. Or if even prior to that, the child starts showing pubic hair, then the child is considered, obviously they've gone through puberty, they are now an adult. And the third one is if there's the production of semen or the menses, respectively for the boys or for the girls. This is obviously showing that they've gone through puberty. They're now able to, reproduce and have children and so forth. So this is showing that they've gone through puberty. So whatever happens first, this now means that this child has now become a man or a woman, and now they have to fast, inshallah. The obligation is upon them. So that's the first category. The second one is those who are mentally unstable or those who are unconscious. Those people, they have no fast, and they don't have no makeup days, and they have to pay no fidya. The fidya is like a ransom. We're going to talk about that more in a moment. But this person, if you're in a coma, or if you're senile, or whatever the case is, if you're unstable mentally, then nothing is upon you in terms of the fast. Now, as for the traveler also has an exemption. However, that exemption does not have to be taken. The traveler can break the fast and make it up later if they want to, or they can just get it done if there is no harm. Obviously, if there's harm, if there's difficulty, then they should not do so. But if it is easy for them, then it's up to them if they want to, if they don't want to. And we know from Anas ibn Malik, rahimahullah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he said what? كُنَّا نُسَافِرُ مَعَ النَّبِي صلى الله عليه وسلم فَلَمْ يَعِبِ الصَّائِمُ عَلَى الْمُفْطِرِ وَلَا الْمُفْطِرُ عَلى الصَّائِمِ. That he said, we used to travel with the Prophet ﷺ, and neither did the fasting person criticize the one who broke his fast or who wasn't fasting, neither did those who broke their fast or wasn't fasting criticize those who were fasting. So in other words, when the Prophet ﷺ traveled with people, some would choose to, some would choose not to, and there was no blame either way. It was just totally up to you. The only blame would be if it's harming you, then you should obviously take the rukhsa, or take the exception, or the allowance, and break your fast. Another exception is for those who are sick or physically weak, let's say due to old age. Now, of course, if their sickness or if their weakness is very light and they have the ability to fast, then yes, they should fast. But if it's heavy and it will worsen their condition, then there are 2 possibilities. Possibility number 1 is that we're talking about a sickness that is temporary in nature. Because let's say the person is young and they're expected to improve, and therefore they are going to make up those days later on before the next Ramadan. That's important to mention. Before the next Ramadan, they have to make up those days. However, if it's not of a temporary nature, rather it's of a permanent nature, the sickness that is, or the weakness due to old age, because obviously if somebody's very old, the idea that they're getting better is just not very realistic. They're very old, they're only going to get worse until they eventually pass. So the idea is then what? Then such a person, such a usually elderly person, is expected, the obligation upon them is that they must feed a needy person each day as a ransom or as a fidya. This is because Allah Ta'ala says what? وَعَلَى الَّذِينَ يُطِيقُونَهُ فِدْيَةٌ طَعَامُ مِسْكِينٍ. Allah says, and upon those who are able to, a ransom as a substitute of feeding a poor person each day. This obviously brings up the question about the fidya. How do I implement this? How do I get this done? So if I have to feed a needy person every single day, how am I going to do this? So there's a few opinions about this. The majority opinion is that you literally should give food. Why? Because Allah said feed people. That means you should give food itself. This is the opinion of the Maliki, the Shafi'i, and the Hanbali position, is that it must be food, not money, as a ransom or as a fidya. And the food, what type of food should it be? Some sort of staple food of the country, rice, wheat, even dates, whatever the case is, something that is sort of considered a standard food item. And what is the amount? The amount is a half of a sa'. A sa' is, or I should say, a half of a sa' is how much? 1.5 kilograms. Half of a sa' is 1.5 kilograms, roughly speaking. So 1.5 kilograms a day to somebody who is in need of some sort of staple food, and that should cover your fast. Now the question is, can you give it in one shot? Because obviously going out and finding somebody each day and giving each day might be burdensome. Yes, you can give it in one shot. You can't give it at the beginning of Ramadan. You have to actually wait until you owe those fasts, and then let's say at the end of Ramadan, you could do it all in one shot. So theoretically, the end of Ramadan comes, and then you, let's say, give 45 kilograms of food items to let's say a homeless shelter or to the needy, essentially. This is possible. And another possibility is that you have a very large dinner party, or let's say you go to a homeless shelter and you provide all the food and make sure that over 30 people are fed, or that there's more than 45 kilograms of food that you had paid for, that you bought, and that, who knows, maybe even inshallah ta'ala you prepared, and then inshallah ta'ala you are good to go. The Hanafi position is easier. It's a minority opinion, but it's still it still is an opinion that it doesn't have to be food. It can be the cash equivalent. So, wallahu alam, I definitely see the wisdom behind the majority opinion. One is that Allah said you should feed people, so that's why they stick to the wording and say, look, stick to food. Another possibility, Allah knows best, is that perhaps it's the case that you have to be more involved with those who are needy, instead of just writing a check and saying, I don't want to deal with these poor people. I don't deal with those people. I'll write a check and just leave it alone. So that's one possibility. However, those who take the Hanafi position may also argue that, hey, because I can send a check, I can send it to people in different countries that are even more in need than the people in my country. So Allah, I'll leave that up to you to research more yourself, inshallah ta'ala. But anyway, these are the different opinions, and do with it as you will, inshallah ta'ala. And when it comes to women's issues, a woman doesn't have to fast if she is, number one, on her hayd, which is the menses, number two, postpartum bleeding, which is called nifas, or if she is pregnant and she is in such a state that fasting will either harm her or the child. Now, of course, there could be the case that the woman is in the early part of her pregnancy, let's say the first 1 or 2 months, and let's say the days are very short, and the nights are very long. Let's say it's in wintertime, Ramadan. So in such a case, then fasting will not harm her, inshallah ta'ala. Obviously, she has to check how she feels and maybe speak to a medical professional, but let's say you could imagine a scenario where it doesn't harm her at all, so in such a case she should fast. However, if let's say she's near the end of her pregnancy and it's in the summertime and the days are very long, then this could be harmful for the child or for herself, and so yes, then she should not fast. Now, if a woman makes a ghusl after her menses have stopped and she sees slight spotting afterwards, this does not invalidate the fast. As the companion of the Prophet ﷺ, Atiyya radhiyallahu ta'ala anha, she said what? Kunna la na'uddu al-kudrata was-sufrata ba'da tuhri shay'a. We would not take into consideration brown and yellow fluid or spotting after purification. So in other words, these slight spots or whatever the case is, this is not considered something that is going to invalidate the fast. What should she do about those missed days? Well, there is a difference of opinion, but it seems that the strongest opinion is that she should make them up before the next Ramadan. She should make those, whatever days that she missed, she should make them up before the next Ramadan. Now, if she had many consecutive pregnancies and therefore missed many Ramadans, you can imagine a sister who had many children, let's say relatively back to back, and because of that, she just simply could not fast. Maybe we're looking at like 10 years, and she could not fast once. So now she's got 10 Ramadans, let's say 300 days to fast in a row, and let's just say, it's really not very realistic for her. Then there seems to be a number of scholars that take the opinion that in such a situation she can take the concession of paying the fidya. So in such a case, we'd be looking at the 1.5 kilograms for each day, and then multiply that out by 300 people. Inshallah ta'ala, if she can afford to do so, then inshallah ta'ala she should be able to pay the fidya, and that would be more realistic in some people's cases than to fast such an excessive amount, and Allah knows best. Now, there is something called istihada. Istihada is the excessive bleeding beyond the menses. And when a woman is in istihada, she should actually continue to fast and continue to do her prayers. But to do the prayers, she has to make wudu fresh each time. She has to make wudu for each individual prayer. But the question is, how does one identify this istihada, this state of istihada? Well, if a woman has a regular cycle, let's say she knows at the beginning of each month for 7 days she has her menses, then in such a case, whatever is extra beyond that, let's say that's her regular amount, let's say for 7 days at the beginning of each a month, let's say, just to make it simple, then let's say out of the blue, 2 extra days, it continues. Those 2 extra days would be considered, let's say, istihada, and Allah knows best. And from that perspective, what should she do? She should fast those days and also pray during those days. And like I said, you should make wudu each time fresh in order to make sure that your prayers are valid. Now it becomes a little more complicated when the istihada is irregular. So what if they are irregular? It seems that the major opinion is to say that, look, she should know the difference, or the women generally know the difference between that which is her menses versus that which is istihada, or the extra. And so when it comes to the extra, let's say if the blood is different or whatever the case is, then she simply takes that ruling of continuing the fast and doing the wudu each time. But then there's the Hanafi position, which is says no, and this is very helpful for some sisters who say, look, I really don't know the difference and it's difficult for me. Okay, well then the Hanafi position is, if it's under 3 days, then it's considered istihada. So let's say, for example, bleeding starts and she thinks, okay, this is my menses, but then it stops after 2 days, not 3 days. So then, that wasn't considered hayd, that wasn't considered menses, actually that was considered istihada. Okay, so what should I do about those 2 days that I missed? I need to make qada. I need to pray the prayers that I missed, and I need to also fast those 2 days after Ramadan, inshallah ta'ala. And then let's say if it goes over, so it's under 3 days or over 10 days. So if, let's say, the menses continue for over 10 days, then whatever's over 10, then she considers that istihada, and then again, she simply fasts and prays, but prays with each time fresh wudu. Now, the exception to this, of course, is if the bleeding is excessive and will cause dehydration. Therefore, this is considered a form of sickness, and therefore fasting would not be valid, and breaking the fast would be valid, inshallah ta'ala. Now, what about combining intentions? This is a big question. Now that, let's say, you're after the month of Ramadan and you're looking at making up whatever days you might have missed, can I combine my intentions, let's say, with the 6 days of Shawwal? And the answer is no. Why is this? Because you can't combine the intention of doing an obligation with a nafil. You cannot combine the obligation, the intent of an obligation with a nafil. You should rather make up your obligation first, and then once whatever days you missed have been made up, then you could fast your 6 days of Shawwal, inshallah ta'ala. The Prophet says what? Man sama Ramadan, thumma atba'ahu sittan min Shawwalin kana kasiyami dahri. Now, so the Prophet says, he who observed the fast of Ramadan and then followed it up with 6 days of Shawwal, it would be as if he fasted perpetually, like a whole year. So this is a huge reward, inshallah ta'ala. We all want part of it. The reason why it makes more sense to do your makeup days first is because the reward for an obligation and completing your obligation always is going to supersede that which is extra or nafil. So you definitely want to do that first, inshallah ta'ala. Now, technically, you could do your 6 days of Shawwal first, because you have till the next Ramadan to do to make up your missed days of Ramadan from that year. That being said, though, again, you always want to do your obligations first, inshallah ta'ala. Now, what breaks the fast? How do you violate the fast? Well, anything that enters the mouth or that goes down through the mouth or through the nose into the stomach, this, whether it be food or whether it be medicine like pills or so forth, this is going to be considered breaking of the fast. Same thing with vomiting intentionally. The Prophet ﷺ said what? مَنْ ذَرَعَهُ قَيْءٌ وَهُوَ صَائِمٌ فَلَيْسَ عَلَيْهِ قَضَاءٌ وَإِنِ اسْتَقَاءَ فَلْيَقْضِ. If one had a sudden attack of vomiting while one is fasting, so it was unintentional, then there is no atonement, there is no requirement of atonement for him to make up that fast. But if he vomits intentionally, if somebody puts their finger down their throat and causes themselves to vomit, then this person must make up their fast. So that's with regards to food and vomiting. What about sexual issues? Well, any sort of ejaculation is going to cause you to break your fast, whether it's due to masturbation or whether it's due to sexual activity. Sexual activity that is not intercourse. We're going to deal with intercourse in a moment, but sexual activity, foreplay, things like this, anything that causes ejaculation, this is going to break the fast. Just touching one's private parts does not break the fast, but if it does reach a climax, then yes, it will break the fast. you should try to stay away from it altogether, inshallah ta'ala. The whole objective is to try to, stay away from these type of desires, food, drink, and intimacy, inshallah ta'ala. Now, if you do violate any of these conditions, you should still fast the rest of your day. But you have to make up the fast for that day after Ramadan, inshallah ta'ala. Now, what about intercourse? It has its own separate ruling. It's not just making up that same day. If somebody does have intercourse during Ramadan, then you should, number one, make tawbah to Allah Ta'ala, repent for what you have done. Number two, you do have to make up that particular day. You do have to do the qada of making up that fast of Ramadan after the month of Ramadan. And you have to do a kafara. A kafara is a expiation of the sin. How do you make up this expiation of the sin? Number one, free a slave. If that is impossible, then you have to fast for 2 consecutive months. You have to fast for that's 60 days, non-stop, like just no breaks in between. And by the way, when we say consecutively, that also means that you have to make sure that there isn't going to be any Eid. Because if, let's say, for example, you start and then you're going and you're doing your consecutive fasts, and then guess what? Before you finish, let's say there's Eid al-Adha. And now you can't, it's invalid to fast on Eid al-Adha or any Eid for that matter. You're not allowed to fast on an Eid day. That means that you can't say like, I'll just fast anyway. No, it's invalid. You can't say, I'll just skip it, because then it's not consecutive. So you have to plan it in such a way where you're going to do your 60 days with no break, as in there cannot be an Eid inside of it. So you have to be careful about that. And then now a common question is, can a student break his fast because he has an exam coming up? The answer is a categorical no. Some parents might be like, oh, my sweet angel baby, let him break his fast because I care so much about studies. Sorry, just because mom or dad said it does not make it actually true. What if you missed a fast on purpose for no other reason than laziness? So this is, there's just pure like, I don't want to. In such a case, some scholars say that you make up the fast, but it seems that the majority opinion, I don't know, I would say the strongest opinion. Well, Allah knows best, but it seems that the strongest opinion is coming from Imam Shafi'i, Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Uthaymeen, etc. There are many different scholars that say what? The concept of qada, the concept of making up something, whether it be a fast or making up a prayer, is only when the person missed the prayer or broke the fast due to a valid reason. Okay, so let's say, for example, you wake up late, you missed your alarm, and then you're like, oh my goodness, I missed Fajr. Okay, now I can pray Salatul Qada, I can pray my Qada of Fajr. Why? Because I didn't try to miss Fajr, I just slept through it, right? But if, let's say, I don't know, now it's Dhuhr time, and I say to myself, I just don't feel like it. I want to miss Dhuhr. I know exactly, I could pray, there's nothing stopping me, I just want to miss it. In such a case, the idea of making a Qada, according to this opinion, is that it's invalid. And why is that the case? Because qada is for legitimate reasons, and if somebody is arrogant and wants to rebel against Allah Ta'ala, then you cannot make up that prayer. Why? Because that time was missed and you missed it on purpose. If you feel remorseful, then you should make tawbah, maybe give charity money, maybe make up nafil prayers, maybe make up nafil fasts. You can do whatever you want to make tawbah for that sinful behavior, but the idea of making up that prayer that you intentionally missed, no, it's gone, and you just have to repent to Allah for doing so. I do think that this is the strongest opinion, and Allah knows best. Now, things that do not break the fast. What does not break the fast? Something that enters the mouth unintentionally. Let's say, for example, you're on a motorcycle and a bug flies into your mouth. It was unintentional. No, it does not break your fast. So let's say, for example, a tiny percentage fraction of let's say, water droplets through the vapors of a shower. No, that does not break your fast just by breathing because you're in the shower. We know that the Prophet ﷺ actually used to pour water on himself on hot days. When he was fasting, just to cool himself off, obviously not drinking anything, but just pouring water on himself. So taking a shower is not invalid, and the whole fear of like just breathing in the air that has vapors, no, inshallah ta'ala, does not break your fast. Swallowing your own saliva, I know some people, it's very rare, but some people are like, do I just keep spitting all day? No, you do not. Please do not do that. That would be horrible. If you unintentionally touch the opposite gender, it's not a problem. Similar to making tawaf, people go and do tawaf and they're bumping into people of the opposite gender. This does not ruin the tawaf, and this does not break your fast either. Itar, perfume, makeup, lip gloss, henna, all these things do not break the fast. Even the chef that is preparing the iftar for that night, they want to taste the food and then they spit it out. That's totally fine. Obviously, you're not going to eat the food, you're not going to taste it and swallow it, but if you just need to taste it for the sake of proper preparation, there's nothing wrong with that, so long as you do spit it out. Touching of the spouse does not break your fast, but you should be careful with this because obviously touching could lead to more activity, sexual activity, which could lead to either intercourse or ejaculation, which could be a big issue. So we know that Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, she said what? كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقبل ويباشر وهو صائم وكان أملككم لإربه. That the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم would kiss and would touch while he was fasting. So giving a kiss or making physical contact of touching is not a problem. But then she clarifies and says, and he had the most control among you of his limbs. In other words, yeah, he could do that, but he also had control over himself. So the advice to young men and women who are, let's say, newlywed is perhaps you might want to stay away from that because it might lead to more and more and more, and then it could lead to ruining your fast. Now, of course, when men and women are touching one another, for example, there could be something called madhi. Madhi is the pre-ejaculatory fluid that comes out of a man. This fluid does not, does not break the fast. A wet dream, let's say if a person's asleep, let's say around dhuhr time or asr time, during the days of Ramadan and they're fasting, they took a little nap, and then let's say they have a wet dream, that does not affect your fast. You get up, you take a shower, you continue with your day, but you did not break your fast. Blood samples, nosebleeds, let's say if you get your blood drawn for a sample, or let's say you have a nosebleed, or you get a cut, these things do not break your fast. Inhalers for asthmatics does not break your fast. Smoke in general, first of all, it's not going down that same pipe, it's going into your lungs. And also, you have to ask yourself, how far does this go? If you're around a campfire, or if you're near a car and you can breathe in some of the exhaust, would that break your fast? No. So these type of things, whatever is in the air, these things do not break the fast, and Allah knows best. I'm not encouraging people to smoke, because smoking is sinful because it's harmful for your body. But Allah knows best. It doesn't seem to be something that breaks the fast, and Allah knows best about that. There's a difference of opinion about that, just to be clear. But to me, I don't see the evidence for it breaking the fast, and Allah knows best. But you shouldn't do it at all, obviously, because you're doing sinful behavior during fasting. That's horrible. So you shouldn't smoke at all. Anyway, as for insulin, same thing for insulin. Let's say for diabetics, it does not break the fast because again, this is not eating, it's not drinking, and it's not providing any food to the body. These are like medicinal and so forth. Eating and drinking unintentionally does not break your fast. As the Prophet ﷺ says what? The Prophet ﷺ said, إِذَا نَسِيَ فَأَكَلَ وَشَرِبَ فَلْيُتِمَّ صَوْمَهُ فَإِنَّمَا أَطْعَمَهُ اللَّهُ وَسَقَاهُ. If somebody eats or drinks forgetfully, then he should complete his fast, for what he has eaten or drunk has been given to him by Allah. So, you wake up, you know you're fasting, right? You're aware that it's Ramadan, but let's say just out of pure habit, you feel a little bit thirsty, you just walk to the fridge, grab something and take a sip of it. You're like, oh my goodness, how did I just do that? I just did it like sort of on autopilot. If that is the case, don't worry about it. It was a gift from Allah Ta'ala. You enjoyed it and you had no intent to break your fast whatsoever. It was just a sip, and then when you remembered, you stopped entirely. Inshallah Ta'ala, your fast is valid. Can I take a needle shot, an injection? If it's nutritional, like an intravenous feeding, then that fast must be made up later. Because you had some sort of medical issue, you had to be fed intravenously, then that fast has to be made up later because that is a form of food. But if it's remedial or if it's a suppository, then no, you do not need to. And with regards to anesthetics, same thing. If let's say you have some sort of an injury and you're taking an anesthetic, then you do not need to, that does not break your fast. And same thing with eye drops or ear drops. These things are fine, they do not break your fast. However, a nasal spray, because it goes down the back of the throat and into the stomach, then this does break your fast. Oh, and one more thing I almost forgot to mention, that brushing of the teeth does not break one's wudu. I'll start again, 3, 2, 1, hi. One more thing I want to add was that brushing of the teeth, or even like gargling a little bit, does not break the fast, inshallah ta'ala. Of course, you should be very careful. Obviously, you're not trying to lean back and gargle deep into your throat. This would be ridiculous, because obviously something's going to go down in such a case. But let's say theoretically you're being careful about it. You're just brushing your teeth and maybe doing just a quick gargle in the front and spitting it out and making sure that you spit so that nothing goes down. Inshallah ta'ala, this does not break the fast either. So those are a lot of the common questions people ask about Ramadan. I hope this has been helpful. I hope it answered some of your questions, inshallah ta'ala. I hope the fiqh is a little bit clearer for you. May Allah ta'ala make us of those who try to obey Him sincerely and can fast in the month of Ramadan and get the reward. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Jazakallah khair. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.